Andres, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. I want to talk about Juliet and Romeo in a little bit, but first I want to kind of circle around to your beginnings. You were born in Germany, correct? But then grew up in Canada and Hamilton.
So,
Okay. All right.
common misconception. Contrary to popular belief, I was actually born in Canada. My mom tried to do the whole anchor baby thing, which means that she came here, had me, and then she's like, "Great, now I get to stay, right?" And they're like, "No, no, you don't get to do that. You got to go back. He can stay." And she was like, "Oh, okay, so it doesn't work that way." So I was like 2 or 3 weeks after I was born, we moved back to Germany, and that's when I grew up there. And then when my mom finally got the appropriate paperwork and everything all sort of sorted out over the like just shy of a decade, we finally came here, and
So
school
part of your
here
youth
and all
was
this
in
other stuff.
Germany, but ultimately you grew up mostly in Canada.
Yeah, yeah. The majority of like my first 10 years was Berlin, and
And you're
then everything
bilingual?
after
Were
that
you able to be
was here.
bilingual
Yeah,
because of that? Yeah.
I am. Yeah, yeah. Fortunately, so it's the mother tongue, first language that I learned, and then came here and tried to figure English out.
Do you think that your life would have been different if your family had stayed in Germany?
You know what? I've thought about that a few times. Probably, I was an avid soccer player. I like that was like if you don't do your homework, you don't get to play soccer. It was that sort of thing, right? When I came here, it turned into like football and martial arts, kickboxing, stuff like that, right? So I think it sort of shifted everything because in Germany, among other European countries and stuff, like soccer is that's it. You know what I mean? Like they're like American football really wasn't like a big thing in Berlin at the time. It's bigger now, but um, yeah, it was sort of that was like my driving force behind everything was soccer, 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 soccer. So I feel as if though, and like kind of like having grown like even when I came here, I grew up and it was like very athletic centric, if you will. So I don't know that I would have ended up finding acting the same way that I did. But I mean, who knows, right? It's what are they? I heard life only makes sense in reverse. So I don't, I don't know. I don't know for
Yeah, I've never
sure
heard
if I
that
would have
before, but
stayed
that's
if it would have
interesting.
been the same or not.
Um, okay, so in Canada, you participated in karate. You were a black belt, and then placed sixth nationally in kickboxing. In kickboxing, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so there was this. It was at the time, I believe it was called the World Karate Association. It was more for me. It was more the fighting. The World Karate Association at the time, it had like kumite, it had kata, it had there was a couple of different categories. I gravitated more towards the fighting aspect of martial arts, much more kickboxing versus the karate. Yes, first degree black belt. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It definitely taught me a lot about myself. Um, Ultimately, it was something that sort of came. With the risk of sounding
Yeah, sure.
like a can I cuss?
It's not broadcast.
with the risk of sounding like with the risk of sounding like a bit of a putz. Yeah. With the risk of sounding like a bit of a clown, it's something that sort of came very naturally to me. It's something I didn't have to. I had to work at it, but I didn't have to work at it the same way that I had to work at, like, say, football or even this. It was something that sort of just came a little bit more naturally to me, and that sort of backfired in a sense like when you start going up against some people who do take it very seriously and do train very hard for that thing. You start people start to like mop the floor with you, right? So I had to step up my game a lot, and then I ended up fighting for my position in Ontario and Canada, and so on and so forth. And yeah, placed
That's pretty impressive.
placed
Yeah.
sixth, I think, nationally.
Even the
I think
way
it
you
was sixth.
describe that, is like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
I
gonna get
mean,
my ass kicked. Yeah.
busted nose and
I'm out. But yeah, I placed sixth nationally. Nothing, nothing,
yeah, no,
nothing
it
there.
was it was yeah, well, it definitely it took a lot of training, like getting to that point, but it was also I think at the time, so they were sort of like it seemed as if I was oh God, I think I was like 17 or something at the time. It seemed as if they were sort of like figuring out their logistics and stuff, right? So like for example, they had like it was this qualifying system where like locally and then nationally and internationally and so on and so forth. And I because of like and it was like sort of spread out over like a year. like how they had their scoring system essentially. So what happened is like I would have been 18 by the time the Worlds rolled around. So I was 17, and I was like 17, and they're like, well, since in time for the Worlds you'll be 18, you're going to fight 18 to 34 years of age under 86 kilos. And I was like, I was like, okay, it should be interesting. So like when you're 17 and you go up against you know, a guy who's been around the block, and you know, it's a bit of a different beast. So I'm pretty proud of my sixth place, if you will, because I got a fractured nose, and you know,
You got the receipts.
splitting headache.
You got the receipts from it.
To prove that I worked my ass off. Yeah. I got the chits.
All right,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that was in what, high school or through high school?
Yeah, it was well, like cause I was in I was in kickboxing martial arts for like 10, 11 years. So it was like through the course of it was like football and martial arts was kind of the big thing. That's sort of like how I that dictated how my grades were doing. It dictated how my life was
Okay,
going.
and
It
then
was
somewhat
kind of like
related, a
football and martial arts.
counselor pointed you in the direction of stunt work, which then introduced you to a drama teacher, which then introduced you to acting. Is that how it worked? Is that what
Yeah.
the transition was?
Yeah, so yeah, long story short, long story short story long, that's sort of how it happened. Football and stuff came to an end. I had too many concussions. I started getting a little worried about about the dome. And I was experiencing like, I guess, like short-term memory loss, and I was like, it made me nervous. So I went and saw my doctor, and this was sort of right around the time they did like deep dives into concussions, and my doctor just basically said to me like, "Hey, keep going and drool on your kids when you're 30, or find something else." And I was like, "All right." So it kind of everything sort of went downhill, like marks and everything, because it was almost as if like somebody like stripped me of my identity, especially like at that age. It was sort of like I kind of like wrapped myself up and hung myself around my own neck with these sports. Like it was who I was. Period. End of story. Every decision, kind of like how my like when I started my acting career, it was like every decision that I made, it was like, is this going to kind of push me into the right direction of like a profitable, prominent career? And so when it was sort of like taken away from me, and they were like, you know, cut it out with the head hits. Um, I was like, okay, so like, yeah, Mark's kamikaze, my like, depression, you name it, for quite a while. And then I tried different things. I tried like co-ops and like like as a mechanic and so on and so forth. Like just kind of tried different things, but none of them clicked the same way that like football or fighting kind of clicked for me. It was just not what I personally at the time found to be what was the right thing for me. And I went and saw my co-op counselor, and I'm like, you know, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this, and I'm like, I can't stand these things. Like they're just not who I am. And her colleague sort of poked her head out. She was like, huh? Why don't you try being a stunt man? And I was like, it was like ding, you know, the light bulb. I was like, oh my god, I mean, you're a genius. So I'm like, you know, like what do I do? Where do I go first? You know, it's like somebody pointed me into a direction, right? And I was like, yeah, what first? And they're like, yeah, go see the drama teacher. She's going to be the one who can give you the best answers for this. And I was like, all right. So I went and saw the drama teacher. Amazing woman. She sort of like took me under her wing. Her name's Debbie Raposo. And I knocked on the door. She opened up, and she's like, "What do you want, kid?" I was like, "I want to be a stuntman." And yeah, all right, step on in. Let's have a chit chat. And I was like, okay. And she goes, "Hey, listen, we got a school play coming up. You should audition for it." And I was like, "No, I don't want to do that. I want to be a stuntman." And she's like, "Yeah, listen, just go audition for the school play. You know, see what happens." I auditioned reluctantly. I booked the lead. I was like, I did that reluctantly, and like in the process of like rehearsing and stuff, I was like, oh, I found my new thing. You know what I mean? Like this is the thing. So I helped like build the set, and like the teachers were like, oh, thank God he found a thing. Just yeah, you gotta go get the just get out of here just so you can graduate and just put you on a
Yeah.
trajectory
So
as
you
long as we're
fell
out
in
of
love
our
with it
hair.
then right away.
Yeah. Yeah, it was almost instant. It was like second rehearsal in, I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
I think I like
interesting.
this. This is good for
And
me.
then so after high school, you got into community plays because you were in Saltwater Moon, right? Is that kind of like your first like theater work outside of
Yeah,
high
so
school drama?
yeah, so I yeah, that same drama teacher, she sort of created a co-op program for me at a local. It was in Hamilton, Ontario. It was one of I think the oldest community theater in North America. I might be wrong, but it's fucking old. Anyway, um, she set me up with a co-op there. She had some connections at that community theater, and she was like, "Hey, can you stuff this kid into an area so he's out of our hair?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure. We can take him." And I started working kind of behind the scenes, and it was like, props and so on and so forth. It was kind of everything. And then I ended up, this lovely woman, Diane, she ended up having me stage manage one of the productions. And it was after, I think, third or fourth play, because like my co-op was over at this point, and I was like, I'm just coming back. So I'm like, you know what? I think I've done sort of all of the things that I can do behind the scenes, so that I understand sort of what happens while I'm on stage. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to audition for one now. And that was the first one I auditioned for was a play called Moon Over Buffalo, which was a farce. And it just had this unbelievable, like just this really charming, very talented cast. And I was a supporting character in it. And the director was very talented. Everybody was just like, of all of sort of like the community theater people, I kind of had like the cream of the crop, to work with in that city at the time. And it was this nice big cast, so it wasn't like too much of the responsibility fell on me. And yeah, they just kind of like peppered me into this play, and it was this super funny. Like the stage, like the stage design was just wicked. The acting was awesome. It was really, really fun play. And yeah, it was sort of, it was like it was that next step. It was like, I got the hooks went in the first play that I did, and then that play with like, that audience and working with such talented people, I was like, yeah, okay, all right. So then I kind of went on and I did another play. It was a tragedy by Garcia Lorca, Blood Wedding, and then I went on to do Saltwater Moon, which was a two-hander, and I got to work with this lovely actress, Stephanie, and her and I really, it was just her and I on stage, an hour and a half every night, no intermission, and it was just, it was that play where I was like, I have to figure out how to do this for a living. So I had to get an agent,
Right?
because
Yeah,
you don't make
this
any
is
money
fun, but I
in
still gotta pay
community
the bills,
theater,
yeah.
right? I'm like, I got to pay some bills.
And it's not like you're in school anymore.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have that.
I
Yeah,
at
I'm in
least
school.
have to make enough to. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm like, I need
Eating's
to
good.
eat, so I'm withering away over here. Yeah, yeah. I was just kind of like stealing snacks out of the theater fridge. So yeah, I did that play, and then I was like, great, now I got to make some money, and I sort of went out on the hunt and tried to find myself an agent. And after a couple of years of sort of doing like auditioning for like student films and stuff like that, I ended up reaching out to a friend of mine, and he's like, I got the perfect manager for you. And I was like, okay. He called her. She saw me 2 or 3 days later. She's like, come with a headshot and a monologue. And I'm like, all right. So I went in, here's my headshot. And I just sat in the office, and there was like, and it wasn't like an office with like a desk. It was like, there was like 3 or 4 agents sort of around, and it was like all open. And she's like, all right, do your monologue. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So I did the monologue, and she's like, I see something in you. Let's go. And
So she stood with
been my
you through
manager ever
everything.
since. Yeah.
That,
Yeah, she put up with all of my little highs and lows and yeah, all the bullshit. Yeah,
yeah.
still around. Probably sick and tired of my shit.
We'll
Let's
edit
be
this
honest.
part out. I promise.
Yeah, no,
Right.
no, you can tell her I said that. She's like, fuck yeah, that guy's a pain in my ass. But we've been together for, I think we've been together like going on 15.
And that's a
probably
long
around 15
time, right? I
years
would
now.
think in Hollywood.
Probably in a. That's unheard of. Like without, like I've cycled through some American representation in the meantime, and she's still like, all right, here we go again. You know what I mean? It's all on my shoulders now, and I'm like, well, I love you. She's almost like,
So explain this. So were you in Canada still at the time?
Yeah. I mean, I work abroad, but
You were based there.
Yeah, I've been in, yeah, this is sort of home base for me now. Yeah, family. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's kind of wild because so when I came over, it was just sort of mom, dad, sister. Like I didn't grow up with like the cousins and You know, like my father's
Oh my
the
gosh.
14th kid,
Mm.
and yeah, from Austria, right? So my dad grew up in Austria. He's the 14th kid. My grandfather, my dad's dad,
Oh.
fought in both world wars. Not my great grandfather. My granddad was born in 1890. My dad was, yeah. My grandfather was 60 when my
That's
dad was
awesome that you
born,
have
the
that family
14th kid.
history too, because a lot of people
So
don't. That's interesting.
yeah, and that's it, right? So, but like, I came to Canada with my mom, my dad, my sister, and I've got like hundreds of family members in Austria and Berlin. Not so much Berlin, more Austria. Berlin, it's like, you know, aunt, uncle, a few cousins, nothing crazy. But like, and then you come here and you kind of grow up with your, you know, your immediate family, and then, you know, you partner up with somebody who's got like more parents than you know what to do with, and now, like, you know, with the newborn, it's like grandparents coming out of the, you're like, God,
Yeah,
there's so many people, you're like a hard
you
time
thought the family's
remembering all
going to
the
grow by
names
one
and stuff.
child, but now it's growing by several
Yeah,
relatives.
so
Yeah.
yeah, they're like, we're gonna go to the 1 year old's birthday party. I'm like, what? You know, who goes to a 1 year old's birthday party? And they're like, it's not for the 1 year old. It's like an excuse to get together. And I'm just not, you know, I didn't grow up that way, right? Because when I
You
came
weren't
here,
thinking
it was
about that
just, you
before you
know,
had
it's just us.
the
So
child, right?
yeah, it's no, you know, no, you don't think about it. And then it's like you're going to like all these things, and you're like, I got stuff to
At the
do.
same time, I'm sure them being around helps you out a lot, right? I can imagine.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. I honestly, you hear stories of like single parents, and you know, uh, like a lack of support, like, you know, in your community, like they're the reason our community. And I mean, like, I say this very loosely. Like, there's a lot of people that wish they had the problem of not having, you know, they wish they could have children, or they wish they, you know, had the opportunity to adopt, or whatever the case may be. It's like everybody's journey is very, very, very differently. But for me, in this particular chapter of my life, um, they like our sort of like circle, our community that sort of helps us do this is the reason I'm sane right now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So
Yeah.
yeah, well,
Very
I can
grateful to
imagine.
the
I can
people that we have
imagine, and
around.
I think it's great to have family around like that. That, you know, it's a support system, and it's not just, you know, you and your wife. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, so I wanted to talk about.
Mhm.
Okay, so actually, so circling back. Um, so you were in theater, and then how did you
Yeah.
make the transition into television? Because eventually you would be on Working Moms on Netflix, big global show. So what was that transition from theater
Mhm.
to then acting on television? And did you make the move to Hollywood? Like, how did that part work of your life?
Yeah. So
That's
that's an
probably a long,
interesting.
loaded
Oh God,
question
how
with a
much time
lot
do
in
we have?
between there.
Yeah. It's yeah. I'm gonna try and figure out how to sum this up and make it digestible. So I guess the best way, sort of like, I love theater. If I didn't have the bills to pay that I had to pay, I would love to sort of like explore that more. And hopefully one day I can go back into theater. It's weird. It's like, so started kind of like trying to find any sort of audition, whether it was like word of mouth at the time, like I'm making it sound like like the 1950s. Navigating, like, sort of navigating, like on the internet, sort of navigating, finding like auditions and stuff like that. It's not the same as it is now. You know what I mean? Now everything with like AI and word of mouth and advertising and all this other stuff. Like, you could find an acting class in a heartbeat. You can find everything in a heartbeat. Right back then, it was a little bit more like, oh, I know this person that, you know. It was a lot of that, and finding like sites where you see like student films advertised and stuff like that. You know, so it was a little bit of that. For a while, and then my friend introduced me to my now manager, Jessica, and it was sort of, it was, you know, you audition, a couple of commercials here and there, so on and so forth, and then you sort of like sharpen your teeth in, you know, in the auditioning process. You start to realize, like, you know, what's beneficial, what's not beneficial, you know, like what's, you know, don't be late, make sure that, like, I got a really good bit of advice very early on, and it was like, from the second that you sort of like park the car or get off the bus or whatever the case may be, finish walking, like as soon as like you're within like a couple of block radius of where you need like the audition, you're on, you know what I mean? Because you don't know who you're holding the door open for, that sort of thing, right? And that, so it was like, that was like the first bit of it. So I'm like, okay, so whenever it's like I get out of the car, I step off the bus or whatever, you're always kind of on. All right, perfect. So it was this like auditioning process and like casting directors kind of recognizing the face and so on and so forth. And then eventually I landed, you know, first film and then show, and you start to like understand and digest the different jobs on sets, how it differs from like, you know, being in like a theater production and so on and so forth, how it all works. You know, there's a lot of moving wheels on a set that you don't necessarily have in like a community theater setting, right? So you start to like get to know that, and you know, kind of how all that works. And then it was just, you know, nose to the grindstone, kind of put foot to ass as long as you have to, with like as, you know, positive mental attitude as you can in this industry. And then yeah, fortunately it got to a point where I was able to, you know, I had networked enough and worked enough that I was able to get myself into a room of, say, something like Workin Moms. And even that, like the casting process kind of, it took a couple of months, like 2-3 months. And for somebody in my shoes who was like, you know, I was eating like craft dinner, like not even craft dinner. I was eating the no frills mac and cheese for like 67 cents. Right. So it was like, you get this, hey, you know, you have a callback for this show. And it was kind of this recurring character. And I was like, oh my, like it was, you kind of like, you can't help but sort of like sit back and go, oh, I can buy like chicken breasts. You know what I mean?
That's what making it big was all about.
That's a wild feeling,
being able to transition,
you know,
from mac and cheese to chicken breast.
Yeah, and you,
I made it.
Yeah, I had a conversation with my, yeah, and but it's sort of, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with my sister, who's like we're like best friends, you know, like it was kind of like her and I against the world after we moved here, right? And she was talking about loving this job, and I sort of like, I kind of like thought back on what does it mean to love your job, and I was like, if you can do it for like 10 years and make virtually no money, like, and you're still like dumb enough to go and pursue it, like that means you love your job, or you're just, you know, you're not very bright. One of the
There's
other.
no second career choice at that point, you know. Once you're 10 years into it, it's like, yeah, even if you are struggling, you're doing it.
Yeah, it's yeah, you burn the ships. Yeah. There's no alternative sort of thing. And at least not until you get to a point where you might be able to consider something like that. But yeah, no, so yeah, it was sort of hey, you have a callback for this show, and I was like, oh my gosh, like you're kind of okay, all right. And then they're like, we'll keep you posted on the date, and I was like, okay. And it was like, you know, a few days have gone by, weeks gone by, a couple weeks has gone by, and I'm like, is this still, you know, is this still happening? And they're like, yeah, it should still be happening. We're just waiting to hear back. I'm like, okay. And it was like 2 months later or something like that. So for a guy who's like waiting for that chicken breast, you know what I mean? I was like, okay, you know, anytime now. And then like you had like built it up so much that then you do finally get into the room. you're like this at that point, right? You're like just itching for the chicken breast. And yeah, you kind of, you have this, you know, you've prepared, you put yourself into the right shoes, and you go, you deliver, and then you're waiting again, and you're waiting again, and then you finally get that answer. My manager fucked with me. She was like, yeah, no, you know, I don't think they're gonna go. Yeah, you got it. And I was like, you fucker. Yeah, just like stress. I'm watching the chicken breast slip away.
Tell me what I'm eating tonight. Tell me.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, that was sort of like, that first step that kind of put me into, because it's this totem pole essentially that you sort of like climb, and then you have to like transition. So you like go up this non-union sort of ladder, and then you don't want to transfer too soon, because then you kind of follow it. You know, the casting directors don't know you all of it, so you kind of want to try and get as much recognition as possible within like your community and casting directors, and like build a bit of a reputation for yourself. So when you do transfer into the union, it's not as aggressive of a difference. You're definitely not booking as much as you were over here, but you're also, you know, not a complete unknown. They've seen your face before. So you have to sort of find that that balance of like when is a good transitionary period. And I was lucky enough that I was forced into the union when I booked Workin Moms. And so and then fortunately again, networking and sort of like putting yourself out there and meeting new people, I managed to get my first American agent, and that was sort of wild. I didn't I I don't I can't confidently say that I was like, all right, time to go to Hollywood. It's that time now. No, I was like, okay, let's fill it out. Let's see where it goes. It's my first American agent. I've been with Jessica forever now. Let's see how this goes, sort of thing. And they were great. They got me. I It was wild. This was back when when pilot season. This is when pilot season was absolutely bananas. Like especially like if you were sort of either a very recognizable face or they were trying to get your face out there for the first time. You were like, there was I didn't even like you couldn't even memorize the amount of sides that were sort of coming in for a while, and you're like you're just completely overwhelmed. And then I booked I got a call back. There was like a chemistry read for a pilot, and I'm like, I can't come to LA. I can't fly out there for a chemistry read. And they're like, they fly you out, stupid. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go. But like, nobody kind of like
Yeah,
this is all like trial and error. Like you just sort of you try it out for the first time, right? Because like, well, you hear a lot of these stories of people that you sort of watched growing up, and they're like, yeah, we flew to LA on our own dime and sort of I faked it, lived on this couch and did that. And like, I lived in the back of a CrossFit box for a couple of months, like in the back room of a CrossFit box. I went down there for pilot season. I drove down, I threw my motorcycle in the back of my pickup truck. I drove down to California, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to stay with my friend. And my friend's like, yeah, no, you
nice
can't
friend.
stay with me. And I was like, oh, fuck. And then my other friend, I was like, I'll stay with my, I'll stay with my other friend. And you just very quickly realize you don't have a lot of friends in Hollywood. It's like the loneliest. It's the loneliest place in the world. And then I like my whole thing was just like I'm just gonna work out and audition or network. Like that was sort of like the whole reason I went down there was to do that thing, right? And both of the people I thought I might be able to stay with, it just like it wasn't an option. But I was fortunate enough that I had started going to this gym and made, I guess, enough acquaintances that they were kind of they spoke to the gym owner, and they're like, "Hey, man, this loser, he doesn't have anywhere to stay. He's here he drove here from Toronto with it, like, can we do anything for him?" And she's like, the owner, Shanita, she was an angel. She was like, "I got this like back room that's empty, not doing anything." So I'm like, cool. So one of the coaches at the gym, she was moving, so she was like selling everything, and she's like, "Do you want my couch?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I slept on a couch in the back of a CrossFit box for 2 months, and it was like every morning at like 6 a.m. I would just hear like crashing barbells and Beastie Boys and sabotage. Like that's how I woke up.
It's also
up,
motivation
right?
to work out every day before
it was
to
pretty wild.
With the pilots.
Yeah, you're like, well, I'm up. I might as well jump in. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so well, I mean, builds character. But yeah, no, it was a pretty wild ride. You kind of just, I don't know, you kind of just grab whatever you can grab and go along for the ride, whatever that ride sort of means to you. And for me, it was, you go down there, you do the chemistry read. I finally did, and I ended up booking the pilot. But again, it was another one of those scenarios where like they're like, great, okay, and they fly you down. Fortunately, with the O1 visa and all that stuff, everything ended up fortunately for me working out. But there was I think about a month or two where like I wasn't even sure. I had booked it, but I wasn't sure that like I would be allowed to go to the US and shoot it. Like you still have to like compete with that whole thing, right? So you're waiting and finding, and then you do finally, and like I went to the airport, and even up until you like sort of land on US soil, because you're like, I'm going to work. You're sitting in the customs office, and you got this like angry customs officers that are like, don't pick up your phone. And you're like, okay, that sort of thing. And then you finally, and I'm watching people get like escorted and like they heard no's and they're like working for like Windows or something. You know, they're not going to shoot a show down there. They're like doing they're doing real people work. And yeah, I'm like watching these people kind of get escorted with no's, and I'm like, that's gonna be me. You know what I mean? And they're like, yeah, okay, stamp, good. You're good to go. I was like, oh. So I finally did. I got down there, you know, and they put you up and you do the work, and you know, you just make sure that like you're the last person that anybody has to worry about. You want to show up prepared. You want to do the thing. You want to be nice. You want to be pleasant to work with. The whole 9 yards. So you do that whole thing and you wrap up. They send you home, and they're like, great. We'll let you know if it gets greenlit or not. And you're like, well, when's that? And they're like,
So I know. So then you have to
months.
sit there every day,
like,
think about it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like, what about the chicken breasts? You know, that sort of thing, right? So, but you start to see like articles start trickling out, and it's like, well, this is a sure shot. Definitely going to get greenlit. This is exciting. Blah 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 blah. Like so my manager in New York called me at the time, and he's like, so you reading the news? And I'm like, yep. And he's like, stop. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, if you bank on this and it goes tits up, you're going to be in rough shape. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. I see where you're going with this. And yeah, it was, I think 2 or 3 weeks later, I kind of put it to bed. I was like, you know what? If it doesn't, I'm just right back to where I am right now. You know what I mean? Chicken breastless. And the email started like kicking. Sorry guys, we didn't get greenlit. Blah blah blah. Despite of all the great news and all the sure shots and all this other stuff, you know. So it's a fucking wild ride. And I also like, I mean, like, but that being said, is like people are like, what advice would you give? And I'm like really, at the end of the day, like there's not like advice is like always bank on you, always bet on you, but like don't. Like, there's not like a lot of advice that, like, what works for you. Do you know what I mean? What drives you to keep going? That's just keep doing that, and just be authentic. You know what I mean? Because like, there's some people, they have to live in the back of a CrossFit box or drive their fucking beater across the country to, you know, XYZ and do this and that. And then I had a conversation with another guy, and he's like, yeah, you know, I wanted to be an actor. I flew from Buffalo to LA.
Yeah.
9 months later, I was done. I was like, and like, you kind of watch that, and then you take a look at your 15-year hustle, and you're like, oh, and it just like hurts to like hear somebody be like, yeah, I decided this thing, and 9 months later, I was, you know, a working professional actor, and you're like, oh, so like you can't compare yourself to anybody else's journey or like the steps that they sort of take, right? So it's like, I did this stupid thing. I drove across the country to another country with my bike in the back, and lived in the back of a CrossFit box, and I ended up doing more self-tapes than in-person auditions. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, you know, that's the thing that I chose to do. And this other actor that I worked with, yeah, he, you know, oh, I flew here, and 9 months later, I'm good.
You're he's winning an Oscar. Yeah, it's like, what?
You know, but it's
so I get some of it's probably a little bit of luck.
It's that
too,
sort of thing where you're like,
assuming
you're
just
like,
timing and all of that.
Well, what is that? There's like a famous quote. It's luck favors the prepared. You know what I mean? Be as prepared as you can be. Work as hard as you can. You want to be an asset. You want to be a very well-oiled, functioning tool when you do finally get a tool, in a sense, like handy, not once you get to set. You know what I mean? Like you want to be the last person somebody worries about. You want to show up, and the director's like, I can trust this person.
Yeah, they have confidence in you.
That's
and it sounds like even today, it's still like acting is just a dopamine rush, right? So you get the green light, you get the show, you get all the fame from it. It's great. Then the next day, maybe, oh nope, I didn't get that one. Then it's it's back to mac and cheese. But
it's like 90. I was kind of joking, because you're sort of like, unless you're one of the tops, you're sort of like your own brand manager, your own sort of hype man, your own this, your own that. Like, so long, you know what I mean? Like, you're kind of, I think, like, for the longest time, even now, like, based off of like all the jobs that sort of like, your taxes, and like if you don't have a good account, your tax, your this, your that, your posts, your whatever, your rehearsals, your auditions, you're only like acting, if you're lucky, 5% of the time. The rest of the time you're doing everything else to try to act for that 5% of the time. That 5%, that the whole reason why we do it is to do this 5%. 95% of all the shit you really don't want to have anything to do with. And then it was Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson said, discipline is doing the shit you hate like you love it. So you got to do that 95% of shit like you love it so that you can do the 5% of the stuff that you really want to be doing.
And that sums up acting.
You know what I mean? So it's
for 95%,
not the guy,
for 95%
not the guy who flew to LA. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, but like, and that's it all, like, and then like full circle back to like that. If you love your job, you're willing to do it for 10 years for, 67-cent box of mac and cheese. I don't even think it's
don't forget the
67
tariffs
cents anymore. It's probably more than that. But at the time, it was 67 cents.
We won't get into that, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now we got to extend the
So
time.
I do want to talk about your new film, though, Juliet and Romeo. And you play Lord Paris.
Oh.
It's a pop opera film.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? What drew you to the role? Just talk about that whole process.
Well, so I knew Tim before he did Juliet and Romeo. I met Tim through Spinning Gold and various connections that we have together, and he thought that Lord Paris would be a good fit for me. Knowing the original Romeo and Juliet, not Juliet and Romeo, I was like, Paris. I'm sort of like yeah, you have like the doting father and Workin Moms, or various other characters that I've played, but like Lord Paris, like traditionally the way that I know him, I'm like, I don't know that I sort of like just sort of like, unless you can work magic on this, I don't know that I sort of I mean, that's I guess what acting is just sort of make sure you do your job again. But I was like, and he's like, no, he's like, watch this, and he sort of like explained his vision for the film, and like the colors and the vibrancy and the boldness and the grand sort of energy that this film brings, and like his idea for he's like, this is what I have in mind for Romeo and for Juliet, and this is kind of what I thought for your character. And I was like, oh, so you mean that? And we kind of like bat these ideas back and forth, and we very quickly understood that him and I had the exact same thing in mind for Paris. It just wasn't like the traditional Paris that we know and love that Paul Rudd had, for example, has played, right? So we gave him a little bit more bravado, a little bit more kind of, I guess, like what I bring to the table in a sense. And it just worked. His vision for Paris and kind of what he wanted, like aligned very well with me. Cause like, just like every other actor, ambitious person who wants to work, is like, you start taking a look at like the Tybalts and the Mercutios and so on and so forth. And then like, when he introduced me to the Mercutios and the Tybalts and so on and so, you're like, oh, I like it was like the gears just went like, click, and then the next one click, and then and like every time we sort of like talked about the project and the character, I was like, I know I could very clearly, he has a very great way of like sort of explaining his vision. It's very detailed, it's very vivid, and it really helps you do your job, or at least like prepare and come to set prepared, because he explained what he's looking for so well, so that like, I mean, like once you've got, like, you're in these big, beautiful castles, and Dante Ferretti like designed these unbelievable sets for you to be in, and then you kind of show up in this 14th century garb, and you're like, okay, I got it. It makes sense. Everything that he explained, it helped me do my job properly. And now I'm prepared. I'm showing up, and he can kind of focus on like a million moving things. And he doesn't have to worry about me. And, yeah. So when I originally, heard Romeo and Juliet, I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be. And then when he sort of explained Paris to me, he's like, I understand my job here. Right. And it didn't take long for me to see his vision. It didn't take long for me to get excited about the character, and
coming kind of from theater, were you into Shakespeare before this?
So yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Like,
I mean, I think like, any actor, any actor, like that's, you know, he's the staple.
So if
You
you're
know
in
what I mean?
acting, because I'm saying like when I'm in school, I'm
everything
like,
sort
yeah,
of
I'm
branches
skipping
off
this.
of.
Read what? Shakespeare? This is boring.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Pass.
Yeah. It wasn't like a trick
To
question. I'm just
be or
curious,
not to
like,
be.
you know,
Yeah.
if as an actor, you know, you're into, just because that is, you know, such a big part of like what drama is, especially, you know, starting in high school.
Yeah. Well, I'm for sure. Yeah. No. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I was
Yeah.
always in love with Shakespeare. Like that definitely wasn't. I was more like, hey, pass the ball. You know what I mean?
Right.
That was more me for a really long time. So then, you know, you experience acting and then sort of like where that comes from and what that means. And then you go into theater and then you sort of like, you start to, there's like this flow of things that starts to happen that introduces you to different aspects of what it is that you do. And it's like anybody that starts to really show interest in a career, they're like, well, where did all this come from, or where was this influenced, or like how was this, like this writing style, or whatever the case may be. You start to like wonder about the history of the moving wheels, the cogs, you know what I mean? And then eventually you start to see where it comes from, and you start to like you understand the history of everything better, and you start to like dive into different scripts and different stories, and you know, how where were they influenced, and so on and so forth. And it just, you very organically, if you love what you do as an actor, if you love what you do, you tend to understand it more, and and then you sort of love learning about it, and then you just love it. And it's just this graduation process. I think the same way that, like, you know, you love cars, but then like you're like, but how does this work? And then you move on to the engine, you move on to the drivetrain, you know what I mean? Like what for aerodynamics and or motorcycles, you know what I mean? In my case, I ride a Harley, and then it's like, oh, I love this Harley. And then I'm like, how does it work? You start like pulling it apart and all this other bullshit. And you're like, okay, cool. This is how this works. So then like, I ripped my Harley apart. I put it back together. And I mean, it's not something that just like, you know, you had a lot, a lot of this,
Yeah.
a lot of thrown wrenches and shit. But like, I also then broke down and I was like, oh, okay, what's wrong? Fixed it. You know what I mean? I had to walk to the store to go and fix it. But like, if I didn't understand how it worked, I wouldn't have been able to do that thing, right? So it's like, it's almost like anything that you love to do, you want to understand how it works, where it comes from, what makes, you know, that sort of thing. And I think it just goes to like
Yeah. I
anything
think it
that you
makes you
love, right?
better. It makes you fill that role better
And
in whatever you're doing, and more authentic too. And I think that's part of it. You know, you want to come
well,
across as authentic.
yeah, I mean, like you're,
So yeah.
yeah, well, and that more than ever, you want to come across as authentic. And look at what you're doing. You're running a podcast. You're like, well, what does it take to run a successful podcast? And then you start going in like into the, okay, well, this is what this person, this is what this, and it's not like necessarily that you compare what it is that you're doing to the other people that are doing it, but you're kind of like, oh, okay, I understand that in order to really start to, I got to do 1,000 episodes. In order to do 1,000 episodes, I got to make sure I do this, and this. I got to have at least this many episodes this month. And you kind of like are always
Yeah.
just getting better. It's the same thing with acting, and then you like kind of, it's almost sort of like an unwritten rule to eventually at some point in your acting journey, at least like even if like, you know, you don't love the way that Shakespeare writes, or you know, you don't, you know, whatever, you at least have a respect for where it all comes from, and
Yeah.
you know, the
Yeah.
artistry
No,
behind it,
definitely.
right? Same as anything
Yeah.
else. Long way to say
And
it.
I'm glad that you appreciate all the work that goes into a podcast. Because many people think, oh, I just want a podcast. Yeah, it's not
Absolutely,
exactly
yeah. No.
easy, all the work behind it. But yeah, you're right.
No. Well, it's very like a lot like the acting. You have to do your own promotion, your
Yeah,
own
the gear, the
advertising, your own
lighting,
this. You have to,
the
you know what I mean?
question
Like
writing, the
there's a
editing,
lot
yeah,
that
all
goes
of it.
into it.
Yep.
Yeah, the whole thing. Yeah, and like, I mean, I can't imagine that's always exciting. And then like the other thing is like as much as like I don't want to say anything about any of the guests that you've ever had, but I'm sure that there's some guests that are like, your problem with me is I
Well,
can't
we're all
shut the
done
fuck
here. We
up.
got
I
to
just
go.
keep talking.
No.
You know what I mean? With a lot of, I'm, yeah, and done. But I mean, like, I'm sure that you have guests where like, I'm really trying to
Yeah.
like pull some answers. You know what I mean? And like, you gotta like, and you're sort of like being a chameleon, and working with whatever it is that you need to work with in order to get the juicy answers that you're kind of looking for. For me personally, like I like long format, like I like the discussion aspect of something like this, right? Which is also what leads me into longer conversations. But I like, for me, it's like the quick short form answer question. Make sure you hit all the. I just like, I guess the authenticity isn't really there for me. So I enjoy this sort of thing more, but a lot of other people don't necessarily like this long format thing, or their answers are very like strategically sound bites and so on and so forth, right? So I guess everybody's got their thing, but for somebody who's like in your shoes, for example, you got a lot of homework, you got a lot of, chameleoning, if you will, to do to pull some of the juice.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate the format because, like you said, it's all about a conversation. I think sometimes like the hard part is when you do have a very hard, tight deadline, or like time frame to do the interview, and you want to like include so much stuff. At the same time, a lot of talent. I'm sure you've done a bunch of interviews in a row. You probably get asked a lot of the same questions. So I always try to come up with something different or unique that maybe the talent hasn't thought about before. So they're not just answering all the canned questions, interview after interview. You got like 5 back to back, and you're like, all right, answer that the 5th time today.
Yeah. Well, and that's sort of like where the long format comes in kind of nicely. Is it's like like when it becomes conversational, you can have a bit of fun with it. You know what I mean? You're
right,
not
and then every interview is different. So
like, to your point,
people who listen to my show are different from other shows I'm sure you've done. So to them, it's new. The conversation, but also it may be different if someone does then find interest in you and then starts Googling you and then starts listening to their interviews of you. They'll learn different things about you. So yeah.
Right.
And I just want to talk about the cast too. Rebel Wilson, Jason Isaacs in it, as well as a lot of young talent.
Please.
So what was it like working with such a diverse cast and with the cast? And was that something unique for you in this project from other films or television?
Well, I mean, they were very lucky to have me.
I'm gonna ask that the same question about you. Yeah. What was it like working with Dennis?
They're like, oh yeah. They're like,
tell me your chicken breast story.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll ask them.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, what? I had worked with Jason on Star Trek very briefly, and
so you knew him before.
Then he's a stud now. The guy,
you go way back.
I know him. He doesn't. He knows of me. I mean, when you're a guy as talented as Jason, or if you're somebody as hardworking as Rebel, you know what I mean? Like, and somebody in my shoes is sort of like, I watched The Patriot growing up. I watched Death of Stalin. I get to work across from this guy, or I watched Rebel. Like, I mean, you've seen Rebel Wilson movies. She's got a huge, like, she comes right out of the screen. You know what I mean? And then you meet her and she's like, soft-spoken, respectful, very kind. You know what I mean? You're like, you get to work with these people and you're like, wow, what a pleasure to work with such professional people who are so talented and you kind of watch growing up, right? So for me, it was, shut the fuck up, listen, let them take you to school, just enjoy what you get to do, and make sure that you aren't the reason you have to do another take. You know what I mean? You make sure that make sure that you come to the table, as prepared as possible, so that they feel that they're also working with a professional, somebody who's, done this for a while and is
but I'm sure
worthy of the same respect.
Oh, go ahead.
In a nutshell. I mean,
I was just gonna say, but I'm sure though that
please.
Younger talent on set probably learned from you as well. Maybe for them it's their first film, and so do you appreciate that too, like being a mentor to them?
I mean, yeah, I suppose. I guess I hadn't thought of it that way.
I guess like if you take a film, everybody's kind of like,
I do my best,
like at a different point in the food chain, if you will, right? The big stars, the stage. This is my first like role, and then I'm somewhere in between type,
absolutely,
role. Yeah, so I guess in that sense,
right. absolutely. No, I do my best to lead by example. I try to be the person on set that I would have loved to have had there when I was at a stage before where I am now. I guess is the best way that I can sort of explain it. Um, do your best to lead by example, show, be respectful of, all the jobs around, not just your job or the director or producer's job. Be mindful and respectful of everybody. Like, kind of all all the jobs are there in order for us to get the same job done. And that's what I really liked about starting behind the scenes when I started in theater, is it, like, it gave me a respect for what's happening behind me. And that's sort of the one thing, well, that's one of the things that I carried forward going into film and TV. There's a lot of moving wheels. Be respectful of all of them. Lead by example. Do a good job. Be professional. Show up prepared with an idea. And I hope that in so doing, I guess, adopt a bit of like a mentor. A mentor sort of situation. I can't say that I've necessarily been tasked with being a mentor specifically, but I try to lead by example and do my best to be the person I would have loved to have
Makes
seen
sense. Makes
coming up in
sense.
the career.
So where do you see? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the same way that
Yeah,
Jason
exactly.
Isaacs did his part. Right?
All right. So what? So what's next for you? Are you taking any time off right now for parental leave, or are you trying to balance fatherhood and career at the same time?
Balance. You know what? I don't sit still very well anyway. So for me, it's good to sort of uh, find. I don't know that I love the word balance, but I guess it's like, just make it work, right? So for me personally, I wrote. So no downtime. Long story short, short story long. I wrote a feature film that I'm sort of putting foot to ass to now. We're in the pre-production stages. I'm really excited to sort of get that off the ground. And then, my kid was born, and it's like straight into PR for this. And yeah, you know what? Honestly, it's just, I like roller coasters anyway. I'm sort of I'm a bit of a thrill slut, if you will. So for me, it's kind of exciting. It's I don't you know I don't like sitting still. I like writing. I like directing. Directing's new, but I really enjoy it. And it sort of gives me that. I'm a bit of a control freak. I'm German, so for me, it's like it kind of gave me the sense of, like, kind of grabbing the bull by the horns, like my career, my future, my situation. You know what I mean? And kind of, yeah, sort of writing, directing, the whole filmmaking aspect, and
So you do want to do it all?
during the downtimes, kind of putting my own thing. Yeah, like, in a sense, right? Like, I there's always going to be things that I'm not as good at, but I mean, that's where, like, delegating comes into place, right? You find a good team that does the other parts really well, and you stick to the stuff that you do well and learn as much about the other stuff as possible. But I personally, like I said, like, idle hands for me aren't great. I like to keep busy, and much like trying to lead by a good example on set, I want to do the same at home for my kid. Right?
Work hard.
Work hard.
Work hard, parent,
Do a
play
good job.
hard, right?
Yeah.
As long as
Yeah,
it's fun.
exactly, right. You just want to make sure, again, like with that whole balance, where you
If
just
your
want to make
career
sure
is
you're around.
yeah,
Well, that's it.
and
Right?
I think you have fun doing what
it.
you do. So, is it really work for you if you're having fun with it?
That's it. Yeah, it was kind of wild. We were. I remember having this conversation. It just, like, the first thing that popped into my head when you said that, we were shooting in Italy, and I realized I was doing exactly what I should be doing, because it didn't matter if I was on set or if I wasn't on set. I was just as happy. You know what I mean? Like, I was either enjoying my life or enjoying my work. And I find that if you can find that sort of seesaw balance situation where, like, it doesn't matter if you're just doing you or if you're at work, you're like, your joy levels are your kind of, your cruising altitude is pretty even. I don't know. I don't know that you can find yourself
Do
in a
you
better
think it's
situation than that.
easier now to be discovered because of social media and technology, or is it harder because there's so much saturation out there? There's so much content. Because I don't know if, like, when you first started, you had to send out the
God, that's a
demo
great
reel and
question.
send it to agents and that sort of thing. That slow process. Where now you can just post a video, it goes viral, and
Yeah.
next thing you know, you're
Yeah.
getting contracts and getting signed and all that.
Yeah, I guess it's like it seems as if, I could be wrong, but it seems as if the person who's not trying to go viral is the one that's going to go viral. You got to work just as hard, if not harder, because it's a little more saturated, because there's a lot, there's going to be somebody better at that next thing that I'm trying to do than I'm doing it. Do you know what I mean? I've also been cast in in a pilot with like 1,200 followers. That could be the case too. But it's like, it's also like the the online, that social media community, like the follower, the this, the that, like we're kind of moving at such a breakneck speed. On Friday you could have it figured out, on Monday
Yeah,
it's
true.
already different. Do you know what I mean? So, and this is sort of like being, I think being discovered, or like, I think that it's really cool that we have the tools that we do, but don't get that confused with making it easier per se, right? Um, Again, I think it's one of those, like, luck favors those that are prepared. I like, the harder you work, like, is there luck involved? Absolutely. Not in a million. I just can't bank my entire career on just luck. If I'm banking my entire career on just luck, I'm fucking
Yeah.
out of here. Do you know what I mean? So there's got to be more to it than just that, right? And then it's like, kind of finding those small wins within, and like helping, using that as like fuel, as like a very potent fuel, because like you're constantly like looking for that next opportunity to work, right? So I found, like, going back to uh taking my career by the proverbial horns with like writing and directing and filmmaking, like kind of doing it all, as you said. I found that gave me it was great for my creative output, making me feel like I wasn't necessarily relying on a yes, or waiting on a no. And it made me feel a lot more confident in what it is that I was doing and what I was pursuing and how I wanted to do it, which was really, like, for me, which was really, really great. And I'm assuming for a lot of other, filmmakers, actors, directors, whatever the case may be, is kind of just like putting foot to ass, being as prepared as possible, kind of always be creating and learning, and like kind of adopting as much as you can. But I don't think that you should get too hung up on, again, use the stuff that we have now as tools, but don't ever think that that's going to be like the catalyst to getting you to where you want to go. Because again, like, we had tools earlier. It was just kind of who wanted to use them. You know what I mean? Like sending in the demos and so on and so forth. But again, it was saturated then. It's saturated now. Who's doing the work? Who's doing it well? Who's doing it, more professionally than others? Who's fun to work with? You know what I mean? Like, yes, absolutely. Is there something to be said about the person who's got 5 million followers over the person that's got 20,000 followers? Yeah, you're gonna run into that shit. But are you gonna let that dictate whether you do the thing that you love doing or not? No, you're not. So go create, go write, go this, go that. And also, if you're doing this for the fame, or if you're doing this for the money, if like, I don't know that you're doing it for the right reasons either. Do you know what I mean? I mean, maybe you are. For you, everybody's a little bit different. Sure, fine. I just don't like. I don't think anybody. I don't think anybody who. I don't think you're gonna like meet a Formula One racer who's like, "Oh, I got into this for the money." They got into it because they need to go fast. Like that, like every, like, again, like every decision that an F1 racer makes is like, is this going to slow down my bottom line on the
Yeah.
track? Do you know what I mean? Like, he's not like, he's not like, well, if I eat this hamburger, that's, this much money down the like, that's not, it's, you're seeking professionalism. You're seeking, in my case, I can't speak on every other job, but you're seeking being the best at the thing. You know, you want to tell a great story. You want to you want to act out a great character. You want to, you see where I'm going with this? It's like, if you're looking for the viral thing, you're not doing it for the right reasons. If you're looking to tell a great story, however that sort of comes to fruition, whether it's on like a no budget, shoestring budget, or a decent budget, if you're looking to tell a great story with great people and enjoy it, while you're doing it, those are sort of like the people. It seems, in my experience, those are the people who go quote unquote viral. But yeah, no, absolutely, it's tough out there right now because you're sort of navigating this beast, if you will, and never really doing it perfectly because it's shifting so much all the time. It seems. But I mean, some people have had great success with it, and some people, I'm not very great at social media, so I'm gonna be the one who defends myself in this particular case. But yeah, no, I don't like. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, if you feel like this is what you got to do, just do the fucking best you can with the tools that you have at your disposal. Do the best you can with the stories that you want to tell. Just do the fucking best you can. And then learn from your mistakes and keep going is like, I guess, the shortest way that I can wrap this up, this answer that is like dragging on. Yeah, just do the fucking best you can. Put foot to ass for the thing that you love, and try not to worry about going viral, and try to just do what it is that you want to do. I
think it's all about passion. If you're passionate doing it, then do it. It don't matter. It doesn't matter about like follower count, all of that, especially when it comes to, acting, I'm sure. And the same can be true with podcasts. I do this because I have a passion for it. I enjoy talking to people, learning about their lives, and careers and who they are as people, because I enjoy learning about people. Not that I have a ton of followers and all this, but I think for the audience that is listening, they'll learn something from it, or maybe they learn something about you or follow you because they find that same kind of thing that I find interesting in people, as well. So that's why they listen to the show or watch it. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I you're up against, like, similarly to sort of the shoes that I'm up against. You're up against a lot of fucking podcasts. You can't compare your journey and your podcast and your storytelling style to the others. It doesn't work that way. You got to do what you want to do really fucking well, and people will catch that, and people will discuss that, and people will be like, hey, you know what? Larry does a really fucking great job over here. Go check it out. It will happen organically, so long as you're doing it for the right reasons.
And even beyond, this long format, obviously with social media, and we were just discussing that, clips do get a lot, thousands of views. And that's often how I discover other podcasts is I'll see a clip on TikTok or Instagram and be like, oh, this sounds interesting. Then I go download the interview and listen to it. So that's how I, discover podcasts. So even beyond, just the long format podcast, there's other ways to be discovered. So yeah. All right. Well,
absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. But listen, like, good for you, man. Persevering in this day and age.
Well, thank you.
You're good at what you do.
And thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Dennis, Andres, thank you so much. Best of luck to you in your career, and I look forward to following you.
Thanks for having me.